And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight I am joined by my guest, Valerie. Valerie, thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Not a problem. Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, when I was little, I started getting those psychic type senses, being able to sense things, really sensitive to spirit world and things like that. And throughout my life, I started being tormented by these things. I started seeing them. I started being in situations where I was just terrified. And then eventually I brought myself out of it to where now I'm not afraid of this stuff anymore. And I just, I want to be able to help people that are in situations where they have haunted homes or if they have things tormenting them in their homes and things. And so that's kind of what I do now.
Mm-hmm. How often, well, not how often, but like how many people have you actually interacted with here since you started doing this?
Maybe about 20. I got about 20 people that I've, helped so far. Through mine, though, mine was basically, purging the stuff out of my own life.
Right.
And then kind of going from there. And I did a lot of studying, a lot of learning about how to go about those types of things, like how to do home cleansings, how to do deliverance or exorcism kind of stuff, and how to, just how to do that. I had to learn first, and then I'd like to be able to help people. And I did help, there was one little girl that, I was at a church and they were having a prayer night. This one little girl was talking to me and she was telling me things that had happened to me when I was little. And it broke my heart because she was being tormented by like demonic spirits. They were coming into her room and they were, touching her like at her ankles or her feet, playing with her hair, just messing with her. And she was seeing them and she was telling me how scared she was. And it made me cry. And that's what made me want to help, because it just broke my heart that children are being tormented and adults. And I just really, I have a heart for that. I want to be able to let them be happy and free in their own home without being afraid. You shouldn't have to be afraid.
Right. No, I agree.
So yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. I want to be able to help people out of those situations. There's not a lot of places to go for that.
No.
You go to a Catholic church and they want you to jump through hoops, or you go to a Christian church and sometimes they're like, "Oh, you're crazy," or you need medical help, or, and I'm just like, no, they're just not teaching it. So
it's very hard to get taken seriously when it comes to some of these topics.
Yeah. And it is. And at first I thought, I was like, am I just, have I lost my mind? Am I just seeing something ain't real? But then things started happening with other people and they were experiencing the same things I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, no, it's on. It's, this is a thing. So
a lot of people have experiences, I think, that just kind of ignore it.
Yeah, I did that for a while. I tried.
It's
But I got
easier
sick
for
of
some
them.
people just to not admit that there's something going on rather than actually coming to terms with something could be going on. Because then when you open that door, you have to start thinking about a bunch of other things. That's how I used to be. But anymore, I've
Yeah.
just kind of embraced it at this point. It's like, no, there's weird crap going on.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can't deny, like, I've had things fly off my walls just out of the blue. So there's something you're like, there is no way that that thing just lifted up the wall and flew across the room.
Right.
That has happened to me. So, and you try to find, like, trying to find an answer to, a rational answer, but sometimes there just isn't one.
No.
So,
As much as
yeah,
I try and explain things off, you get left in a situation where you can't explain it, and then the only thing left is to the unexplainable. So then you have to accept it for what it
exactly.
is.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they just don't know how to handle that. They're like, okay, well, what do I do?
Right.
Do I move or do I go talk to somebody or do I just sit here and just endure? And
Oh,
I want to help give
mhm.
people another option, I guess.
No, that's
It's kind of,
very, very noble of you.
thank you. Just, I just know what that trauma is like. So I
Right.
just, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Well, if you would like to begin from the beginning, you can go right ahead.
Okay. 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 At the beginning, these senses and things, they kind of grew within time. Um, at the beginning, it was just a sense, like, oh, I sensed something over there. And I didn't really pay attention to it because I thought everybody was kind of like that. Because I was like a kid, I was just this little 5, 6-year-old kid. And then I started having, I don't know if, I know on these types of shows with the supernatural or the cryptid type stuff, where they talked about mediums who have those snapshots in their head where they
Right.
see a picture
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes and it's like one of those psychic medium type things. That started happening to me. And then the big thing that happened that kind of kicked it all off was when I was 7 years old, my great grandpa died and he was Native American. And when he passed away, my mom and dad went to the funeral. And when she came home, um, I remember hearing her talking with my grandparents, my other grandparents out in the living room. And I started getting this feeling that because I always had that feeling that something was there. I always had that sense of something hovering over you or just like a presence. Well, this got to where it was really, really, really bad. And I got so freaked out and I was really, really scared and I didn't know why. And then I remember I was playing with one of those little Fisher Price record players that had little squiggly plastics. I just remember that very vividly. But I looked up and in my mirror was this old woman and her eyes were completely white. And I just sat there frozen for a second. And she started it was like she started smiling or it was like her teeth and I could see her teeth and they were like all nasty and I just screamed. And from that day on is when I started seeing actual things that weren't pictures or visions or whatever, the psychic vision type things. Um, it, I don't know if it kind of attached to me through a bloodline thing because it happened right after he passed away. And I don't know if it was something that moved from him to me. I don't know because I know families a lot of times have those types of, the daughter or the next daughter or the grandkid, sometimes those abilities are passed down.
Yeah. I've heard stuff
So
like that before.
yeah. And so I didn't know, but that thing attached to me. I eventually got it to leave it. It took me over 40 years to deal with it. But, um, and then I had another situation where, I would see things all the times. A lot of times there were those little shadow people
Mm-hmm.
that you see in peripheral vision. I would see those all the time. And I would try to sleep on my parents' floor because I was so freaked out because I was only like 7, 8 years old. And these things were running outside of my hallway. I would see them pass my doorway and they were just those little tiny shadow figures. Now I call them house demons. I don't know. It's just like, they're just like these little 4 foot tall things, they're just shadows. No features, no nothing, just shadows. And I would see them run across my door, and I'd be terrified. I'd be laying there just frozen as a little kid. And then, after a while, we moved to another house, and this I found really funny was we had these stairs. When you would open the front door, there were stairs that went up and the stairs that went down. And if you went up, there was a walk-through kitchen. Well, it was straight up through the stairs. So when you would go down these stairs, you always had that feeling, people talk about when you turn the light off when you're going up the stairs, you feel like something's chasing you.
Right. Yeah.
That's how it was when you would go down the stairs. And I always was freaked out about that. So one day I thought, I was going to get some balls and I was going to walk down the stairs. And I was going to turn around and see what it was. And what I saw noped me right on out of there. I was standing on the like third or fourth stair, and I looked up, and this really tall, pale white woman with really black dark hair came flying towards me. And she was just like running, full force running towards me. So I took off and went down the stairs. And the thing that makes, that weird is because my mom had seen it. And then my aunt, she doesn't even believe in supernatural stuff. She doesn't believe in any of that. And that house, we were renting it from her friend's parents. And she said that one day she was talking to me. She's like, "Do you remember living there?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Remember them stairs?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Every time we ran down them stairs," she goes, "you always felt like you had to run." She goes, her friend had ran down the stairs. She's like, one time, she's like, her friend had sprained her ankle because she was running so fast and fell. And I'm just sitting there like, no way. I was like, it's so confirmation, so, and she didn't believe in any of that. So those kind of things would happen to me all the time. Um, Things would fly out of the closet randomly at my friend's house. We would sit there, and she saw things too. And we ended up because we were just dabbling in a lot of dark stuff when we got older. And she had this little doll. It was a clown, and I hate clowns. They're terrifying. But she had this little clown doll, and she would put it in her closet, in the very back of her closet, and we'd back up and sit on the bed, and that thing would fly out of her closet and land on the floor. And we were stupid kids, teenagers. We're like, we made it a game. Like, we would go up and put the clown back in. We'd get a timer and sit there and wait and see how long it took to fly out of the closet. I mean, it would happen regularly, like all the time. So it seemed like everywhere I went, there was weird stuff. There was something, you would see something or something would happen. And so,
did you feel like it was because of you bringing that energy? Like you were attracting it?
I don't know. Because we would do Ouija boards and stuff. I opened so many doorways.
Nope.
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 Yeah, I opened so many. I was just like glutton for punishment. It was like, oh, it's like I was craving it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I need the adrenaline rush. Oh, I need I would just do that. And it seems like when I would enter the room, I think things were attached to me because I would enter the room and the candles would go out, or, just something weird would happen. It was always something weird. And it just was ongoing, all the time. There was always something really weird. Then I started hearing things like voices. Like I would hear somebody say something to me, and it would be weird. Like, some years back, I heard, me and my husband were watching a fight, and something said, "That guy's going to win." And about half an hour later, that guy wins the fight. And it was like a kind of like a telekinetic kind of thing, like a familiar spirit type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like I could hear it. And I would hear things like, just random stuff. Like, that girl's going to turn left, you go right. And I go right, and that girl goes, I'm just like, okay. I mean, just weird stuff. And I didn't get it. It was, I'd sense things about people, I'd be able to tell them stuff. And so it got to be where, I was born with psychic medium gifts, but I think they were supposed to be used for God and not darkness. And as soon as I started using them for God instead, I lost all fear of these dark things. I was no longer afraid. But it took a while because, I mean, when I started going back into the church and stuff, my church ain't it's a Pentecostal charismatic, so it's just like wild, crazy every Sunday, and
Yeah.
I ended up quitting going to church and just doing my own thing because there was a lot of, I don't know, religious spirit type things there, I guess, like very judgmental, very, the thing that they say about Christians. I didn't like that. And I didn't believe that that was the character of God either. So I quit going to church, but I do a lot of, my mom's a pastor, so I get enough of that from her. So, so yeah, but I ended up being able to kind of conquer all the fear and all that, I mean, I had another thing that when I was little, I think I was maybe 9 or 10. I was in my room and I was in bed and I was going to go to sleep, and I got to where like I always wanted the light on. I didn't want to turn the light off because I felt safer with the light on. It was like I wanted to be able to see my surroundings. And it wasn't because I was afraid of the dark. It's because I was afraid of what I saw in the dark. So I'm laying there, and this 7 foot tall looking, it was like 6 to 7 foot tall thing comes walking in my room. And I started thinking, look like the Grim Reaper, like Reaper is like in a long cloak, and it had no facial features. It walked in my room. It bent down and it stared at me. And I was just frozen in my bed. I thought, do not breathe, do not move, do not, I didn't know what was going to happen. And when I started praying in my head, because I grew up in a Christian home, so I started praying in my head, and it turned around and it walked out of my room. And then my dad, about 10 years later, my dad was telling me a story about something that happened to him, and it was the exact same thing. Something in a Grim Reaper looking cloak walked in his room, bent down and looked at him, and then walked out. So it was the same thing with both of us.
It's strange to me though, if the house was, you would think if your mom's a pastor, a preacher, and the house is
Yeah.
with Christianity and everything, you'd think something like that wouldn't be welcome to come in there in the first place.
Yeah, it wasn't. But the thing is when I was dabbling with stuff, they attached to me. So when I would come home, you would see my mom. My mom, it was funny. She was one of those Pentecostal where she's anointing the house with oil and she's get out, So it was kind of like attached to me. And then when I would go into the house, it was like it gave it a right because it was with me. But then my mom was all mad, So, and things only happened around me. They didn't really happen around everybody else. It was just me. And then you'd hear my mom praying stuff out of the house, and it's just because I opened all them doorways,
Right.
and it wasn't good. So
From
yeah,
my,
I did. So
from my personal experiences, I grew up in Pentecostal too, but they were not over the top in the sense like I've seen some of them are. Like this one was
yeah,
pretty much just like what I would consider normal, except for they spoke in tongues, and I always thought that was kind of strange, even as a little
yeah,
kid.
yeah,
But
yeah,
they did the same
yeah,
things though with the oils and everything else too.
yeah. There was also what people would call exorcisms, but we call them deliverance. Like there was one Sunday I remember I was like 13, and right in the middle of Sunday service, this guy gets up and he just starts screaming. But the creepy thing is it was not his voice. It sounded like 5, 6 voices all in one voice. It was the creepiest sound I ever heard in my life. And he slams into the wall and he's screaming, and the guy starts growling, and they take him out in the hallway. I remember, and this dude's spitting and everything. It was nasty. And I was just watching because I wanted to see what was happening. And I was just a teenager. And it did scare me because they had this guy pinned on the floor, and they had this big table. It was like, it was like one of those tables in some of them old churches with like hundreds and hundreds of pounds, where it took like 6 guys to lift this thing up. This guy was on his stomach and grabbed one leg of the table during this and lifted the table. And I was like, oh, no, no, I was like, I'm gone, I'm out. I was like, But you could hear him. He was screaming and cussing and yelling. And when he came back, he was completely normal. All the guys came. I mean, it was wild stuff would happen at our church. But to me, I was like, oh, just another Sunday. It just kind of, I got used to it. But I quit going. And because of a lot of that judgment type stuff, because I didn't believe that was right. So I have my own views on.
That's part of the reason why I don't go myself. So I don't fault anyone for feeling that way. And I get lectured a lot about you don't go to church because of the people, you go because of a relationship with God. But I am of the mindset of you don't have to go to a church to have a relationship with God.
I agree. I totally agree. I don't think you have to go. I think it's what's in your heart. You know what I mean? I think you got a relationship with God. I don't believe God's in a building. I don't.
Right.
So yeah.
I don't think God's in the building in the sense that they requires you to come there every day to worship him, or not every day, but every Sunday. I don't think God wants your tithes and your offerings. I don't think you buy your way into heaven by offering up money.
Oh, no.
Commercialized, organized religion is where I frown upon things. And if that rubs people the wrong way, that's fine. But I have my own beliefs, and that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I feel too. I think my relationship with God is just private to me. I don't go to a church. My mom has a small church, but I don't go because being the pastor's daughter kind of sucks sometimes.
Right.
Because everyone's looking at you. And whatever you do reflects on her. So I don't like that position. So that's one of the reasons I don't go to her church that much. But I didn't like, like control aspects, like, smack you on the hands with a ruler. Like, you got to be this way. I don't believe that. I believe you should love people where they are, I guess.
I understand the concepts of wanting people to be a certain way in the sense that they're supposed to be following this righteous path, but at the same time, everyone needs to make their own path.
Yeah.
Now, people can offer help, guidance, but you cannot force someone to live a certain way because that's how you get rebellious, and that's how you start doing things, and that's how you start opening up dark portals, and it brings in all that bad stuff.
Yeah.
You can't force people to be a specific way.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think all types. I mean, he loves everybody. You know what I mean? Like, it's where you are at kind of thing. I'm just not. People are going to be people regardless. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I just keep I'm not like my mom being a pastor, she likes to do the preaching. Of course, me, I'm the one that wants to sit in the back. Just kind of sit there like, all right, I'm here, but but yeah, I've through a lot of weird stuff. The weird thing is, I think maybe the psychic ability type medium stuff, with that being passed down, it skipped her. And I mean, it's like all the evil just landed on me, and I just started opening doorways like I was, just stupidly. And then I had to go back and I had to learn, and it took me years. I had to learn how to shut those doorways, completely shut them.
I know.
And
I know people that take these sorts of abilities and they construe them into being acts of the devil. So when you talk about psychic abilities and mediums and everything, a lot of Christian people say that is actual work of the devil. So you're not supposed to practice that because it's really witchcraft. And then that is very shunned upon in a lot of religious circles.
Yeah. I look into, like, I don't really call myself a psychic anymore. I believe I see in the spirit world. I can see what's going on.
You're more in tune.
Yeah.
That's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, I renounced all the worldly aspects of psychics and mediums, but that's sometimes when you're talking to people, sometimes that's what they understand. When you say I'm a seer, they're like, a seer of what?
Yeah. No.
Like, so that's how I closed my all them doorways. I wanted to purify, make sure I'm more into a prophetic realm instead of a psychic realm.
No, I understand.
You know what I mean? I try to purify. That's what I did. I went to a lot of deliverance to shut them doors and a lot of exorcism type stuff. I went through a lot of that. And the church, I agree, the church thinks people like that are weird. I never really fit in, and I couldn't help that I had this, it wasn't like I prayed for it, you know, but yeah, the church just a lot of people don't understand. And what they don't understand, they're afraid of.
I was gonna say there's a fear of the unknown.
Yeah. And to me, I was like, oh, I was all gung ho. Let's go look for Bigfoot. Let's go. I was like, I kind of was like, I used to call myself a fringe Christian because I believe in God and I believe in those prophetic giftings, and I have a more open mind because I think it's because those things have happened to me and I've experienced certain things with other people and they've confirmed the exact same thing that I saw was what they saw. So I know it's real. And I don't know. I know it's real, but I'm not accepted in a lot of Christian circles. There's like a select, like Russ Dizdar. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
His teachings, he does SRA people. He gets people out of ritual abuse,
Okay.
and his teachings were great. Like it helped me to learn how to purify all that, make sure it's not coming from a demonic realm, and because it used to be, but I went through all that, and now it's not. So yeah, I'd like to kind of reach in and grab other people and pull them out of the dark stuff too. So
Is there anything else like I know we've talked a little bit, but like you mentioned the demonic realm. What is some of that you've had to deal with?
um well, when I decided to go back to the church after I decided that, I thought, maybe I should, because I believe that when you're trying to purge kind of this stuff out of yourself and your home, you can't have occult items in your home. You can't have certain things in your home because it opens a doorway for darkness. It kind of, opens that door. So there were things that I had, a lot of books, a lot of things, and I thought, well, I'm going to go burn these, because I thought it'll be a way for me to get rid of them, get them out of my house. And I didn't want to give them away because I didn't want to pass that to someone else. So one day I told my mom, hey, can I use your burn? She has a lot of land and she has a big fire pit. And I said, can I use your fire pit tomorrow? And she said, yeah. And I said, I'm going to go burn this stuff. And this is a story I haven't told anybody that much, but so I get all of the stuff and I pack it into my car, and that night I go to sleep. And a lot of times when something's going on spiritually, for some reason, I hear my back door slam. I don't know why. I don't know what the point is, but I heard that and it woke me up. And I looked over and I was looking, and in my room, right at my doorway, there was this ball of light. It was like a bluish in the middle and it kind of went whitish as it got bigger. And I'm just standing there, but for some reason I felt really at peace. I didn't feel afraid of it. And my husband snores, so we have two different rooms. So I'm laying there. Yeah, I have my own room and he has his. I can't. Yeah. So I'm laying there and I'm looking at this thing, and this thing was peaceful. But my husband's not a Christian. He doesn't believe in any of that. So I'm laying there, everything's quiet. And most of the stuff I had in my car were books. So I'm laying there, and next thing I know, that thing's in my door. I'm feeling peaceful. And then I hear this huge crash. Something had went in his room and lifted this huge bookcase. And it wasn't the bookcase I emptied, it was a different one, and threw it across the room. And he's an engineer, so he's going, well, maybe. And I'm like, because that thing had been there for 10 years. It was not just gonna collapse, and I see some other demonic type stuff. I had a boyfriend some years ago, and his house was the most haunted house I'd ever been in my life. You would hear boots walking up and down the hallway. It sounded like big work boots. Um, I'd be sitting there and you'd hear stuff growling in a corner somewhere at like 11:30 at night. You just hear growls. And I'm like, why does that happen? And I thought it happens every night at the same time. And I don't understand that. Um, One night I was laying in bed and I heard regular footsteps walking down the hallway, and I'm in bed and I'm just looking, and in his hallway, I see this little girl come walking around the corner. She had long black hair. She had completely pitch black eyes. And it made me instantly think of the black eye kids that people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just standing there and I'm looking at her. And I mean, a lot of times when I would see this stuff, I would freeze, and just endure it. I just stood there. She stood there and she stood there for like 20 minutes and I just stared right back at her, just frozen. Um, Also in that house, um, they had no air conditioning and his grandmother's room was ice cold. And when you would hear scratching and things, you could hear her in there cussing at them. She'd be in there cussing up a storm. Well, one night she's laying in there and she's going, sons of blah, 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 and she's yelling and screaming at him. She's like, leave me alone. And so next thing you hear is this hard crack. Well, her headboard was wooden, and what she said, she felt the air go past her face and slam a fist into the back of her headboard. And her headboard was splintered. It had splinters all down it. And he took me upstairs and showed me the headboard, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, just evil stuff would happen. You'd hear, talking and growling. You would hear stuff all the time in that house. Footsteps. I had an old man wake me up one morning, and I mean, I was laying on the couch and I was asleep, and it woke me up and it just was looking at me, and then it turned around and went up the stairs, and you could see through this guy. And at that time, I was terrified of all of it. So I just kind of noped out, because I was the only one in the house. And I just went out and I sat in the grass until we got home because I was just terrified. Um, but yeah, weird things, a lot of weird things. I just, I've had dreams. I sometimes would have dreams and then they would happen. My mom has a neighbor, and my mom had went and visited her house, and I knew nothing about this. And she heard something snarling, and it said to her, it told her that it wanted to basically take this family out. And my mom said it sounded evil. It had like a raspy, 40 years smoking 4 packs a day kind of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know nothing about this. So I go to sleep and I have this dream. And in this dream, I'm at the neighbor's house and I've never met this woman. And my mom never goes over there. She's only been over there a couple times in like 10 years that she lived in this house. And I had a dream that my mom was going to buy that house. And then when we got in there, I saw this thing in my dreams, and it was like, what do they call it? It's that pale white thing, that people were seeing that had the real long legs, and it had like a frog type of mannerism, but it was humanoid.
The Fresno
I can't remember what they
crawler.
call it. The what?
The
Yeah,
Fresno
crawler.
The Fresno night
Yeah.
crawler.
I had a dream and I saw one of those. He was white and he had no skin or he had no hair,
Mm.
pale white skin, and it mannerisms, even though it looked human, it acted like a frog, like it jumped, you know what I mean, with its rear legs. And it was in my dream, it was going after these deer. Well, I called my mom the next day and I'm telling her, I'm like, yeah, I had this weird dream last night. And I told her, she goes, oh my gosh. And so she goes, I heard that the house next door was for sale. So I went over and was talking to the lady that owns the house. She's like, and something was growling and said it wanted to take this whole family out, that it had been in this family for generations. And so that night when I went to sleep, I had that dream. And then I called her the next day. So she had no idea that I had dreamt that until I told her. And I had no idea she went over there.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would dream about things and they would end up being real and just really weird things. I know I've had dreams of, she goes to Washington, D.C. a lot with the church group. And I would have dreams of, uh, in Harry Potter, you know, the Dementor things. Those
Uh,
things are real. The black wispy things.
yeah.
They don't try to suck your soul out, but those things are real. I've seen them before. And I had a dream that there were witches and those things were, you know, moving around in circles and flying around in circles. And my mom said that she went and broke a witchcraft altar. And I told her where it was. It's right outside the Washington Memorial. And she said that's where we were. We were at the Washington Memorial.
Hmm.
And yeah, so things like that would happen. I would see that and I would dream about things and I wouldn't have any idea. And then when I would call and talk to her, she would say, yeah, we did, you know, we did this and that's exactly what happened. And, you know, so there were a lot of dark things that I would see, you know, I've had them like the spider webs that sometimes people would feel when they're laying in bed. You would feel that spider webby feeling. I would get that. And sometimes I'd feel things sitting on my bed. I've never been hurt though. I've never been hurt by them, which is good, but I've felt them touch like my hair and stuff. I felt things like that. And
Have you ever had sleep paralysis?
no, I haven't. That's I've wondered about that because you'd figure I'd see something. I mean, I have woke up and seen things around, but I wasn't frozen. You know, I wasn't
I've had it a
unable to
few
move.
times. I actually get it every so often, but I always just chalk it up to never being fully awake. I don't know.
Maybe.
Like I said, I never even heard of sleep paralysis until a few years ago, but it's been one of those things that I've had on and off here and there. And I'm like in that dream state where I'm looking around and I can see, but my
Yeah.
body's not fully awake, so I'm not able to move. And then all of a sudden I wake up and I'm able to move.
Wow.
But
Do you,
I don't, like I said, people are that's sleep paralysis. Like, I don't know if that's what that really is or not, but
yeah, I think my personal opinion, I think, you know, something has came into your room and your spirit or soul recognized it. Like how, you know, like animals can sense things around them and stuff. But I think, you know, people do that too.
mhm.
Maybe there is something there, you know, and you're just, I don't know. I haven't made a total decision on what I think about that. I believe it happens. I don't know what's behind it all the way.
My stance is I don't try and write things into paranormal. I always try and say it's not paranormal, but that's just my personal way of going about it. So I don't, like I said,
Yeah.
I can't say what it is or not. I always just try to rationalize it in the best way I can.
Yeah. I try to rationalize things and then something happens that kind of confirms that it wasn't natural. So that happens to me a lot. My main thing was the dreams, I think. I've never had the paralysis though.
It is weird to have it. I'll just leave it at that. Like, I'm not going to go any time or any more into it other than the fact that, like, when it happens, it is strange, but
Yeah.
there's no other way of explaining it.
Yeah, I've never had it. I've never had it. Um, I've woken up in the middle of the night sensing stuff in my room and actually sitting up and looking, because a lot of times I would have that feeling that there was just something hovering over my bed while I was sleeping, and I'd sit up and look around and I wouldn't see anything a lot of times, but I've never woke up to, the whole paralysis kind of thing.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
Um, hmm. I think, with all the things that I've seen and experienced, and I was able to shut the doors that I opened. And I was able to, and it took me years to be able to shut these doors and kind of, close off any dark spiritual stuff. And when I was able to do that, I lost a lot of fear from all that stuff. And I think I just want to help people to not be afraid and to, I think I opened up a YouTube channel and I want to be able to teach people ways to do cleanses on their homes, ways to do things like that so that they're not tormented by this stuff, because I was, and I didn't have any control over it. I'd like to say for 35 years, I was just tormented all the time. And the stories I did tell you, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't said to anyone, but it was like a daily occurrence for me. Something weird was always happening. I always felt oppressed, like something was in the room with me. I found out how to get rid of that feeling, and so I want to teach other people how to get rid of it too.
What is your YouTube page called for anyone out there listening?
Candle in the Darkness.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 3 videos so far. I'm learning, so be patient. I'm learning how to do all the YouTube stuff. But yeah, it's Candle in the Darkness. And I get on there and I tell a lot of my situations that I've been through and, how I felt during that time. And I learned how to do, things like break bloodline curses. I learned how to do deliverance, which people say is exorcism. I learned how to do home cleanses. I learned how to do all that kind of stuff. And I want to teach others how to do it so they're not in fear. Because I mean, you should be able to be in your home without being afraid. You should be able to not be a prisoner to, you know, scary, dark things in your home. And honestly, wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I really just want to help. I want to help because I've been there. So yeah, it's a Candle in the Darkness. So I got 3 videos so far. Soon I'm going to be teaching on, how to close doors, how to do all that kinds of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like Ouija boards and
I just say don't mess with those. Best.
yeah,
The best thing
I
to do is
did.
don't
I
mess
used
with them.
to. Yeah, not no more. There's certain things now that I'm just like, I ain't touching it. It took me too long to get that door closed. I am not opening up a no more door. I'm not.
I'm too superstitious to mess with a Ouija board.
Yeah, I did it all. I mean, I would get books on Peru. I did all that stuff. I mean, it was like a competition for like how many dark doors can I open? And I did it just as a stupid kid, a teenager and 20 something. And it's taken me years to learn how to shut those doors. So now I don't feel a lot of the stuff I used to feel.
I was going to ask a question before we wrapped up. You've mentioned like the exorcisms. Is that something that you've actually done for someone else? Because I've talked to a few other people that said they've been exorcists, but how does one really know
Yeah.
if they've cleansed the person of what they think's being possessed by them?
A lot of times when you do that, there's a feeling of freedom when that stuff leaves. A lot of time when the demonic stuff manifests, you'll it's always a hateful thing. There's always aggression, anger, hatred, all this. They'll come out really angry. And when you start to do deliverance on somebody, you start rebuking these things out of them and they leave. And a lot of people, these people will what's gross is a lot of time they'll spit, they'll get sick. And once they're free, once you get, all that's done and they're free, it's almost like they're changed. They feel lighter. They're not feeling the things that they felt before. And their personalities will change too for the better. Like they will be at more peace. They'll be, I did, we did that on that with that little girl. We prayed for her and she said there's something weird going on in my stomach. I thought I'm going to be sick. And so we just kind of loved her through it and just kind of, got all this. And she told us that she felt, you feel lighter. You feel unchained. You feel, you feel it. You actually
Mhm.
feel it. You can tell. And there's ways to tell. There's a freedom. There's just your sense, you just feel it's like being sick and then getting better. You just feel it.
I've asked this before, but I'll ask you. Now, if anyone is listening, and I don't want to put any bad juju out in the ether, but
Okay.
for anyone listening, if they believe that they have a demonic attachment or a bad spirit on them or something,
Uh-huh.
what do you suggest for them to do?
Um,
How would they
First, I
how
don't,
would they know the signs, I guess? Start with that. How do they know the signs,
a
and then
lot
what
of
can they do?
times it'll be thoughts that aren't yours, that aren't yours, like, um, certain behaviors, I mean, usually you can tell if there's something in you that is dark, if you feel a darkness. And a lot of times people around you will notice changes in somebody. Um, you can have, there's physical manifestations, there's psychological manifestations. Um, Usually what you would do is, me personally, when I had something attached to me, I went to God and I prayed and prayed. I did a lot of deliverance prayers. I did a lot of stuff, and it's a process. You kind of got to little bit by little bit. And I felt you could feel those things leave me when I did that. And you would just basically pray and, talk to God. And, you had to renounce whatever you did. Like when I renounced the Ouija boards and the satanic stuff, I just said, I renounce this and, please remove this from me. And I don't want it. And I, reject it. And you'll physically feel better. You know what I mean? You'll know. I don't know how to really explain it. You just know. You know what I mean? You feel better. You feel lighter. You don't feel so bound anymore. And
Like a weight's been
you'll
lifted
start
off
to
of
get,
you.
yeah, it's like you were carrying 20 suitcases and you just got to put them down and you're just like, ah, it's gone. You can feel it. And I went to, I did a lot of it on my own, some with my mom, but, I went and I listened to Win Worley. He has deliverance videos and I did a lot of studying on Rustizar. Um, he does a lot of SRA victim deliverance. And it took me a long time, but I went through all that. And I went from being a scared, terrified kid and teenager to now like if I see something now, which they stopped coming around my house. I don't really see them like I used to in my home. So now I might be like startled for a second, but then I get mad and I go after it. I'm like, no, no, you're not. No, get out. I go after it now. I don't ignore it anymore. I go after it. I ain't playing no more. You're not going to torment me. No, I'm done. So I did all that. And when you learn how to deal with stuff like that, you get more strength, I think. You feel stronger and there's just a change. You do feel a change in yourself. And it's like going to therapy or something. You feel a change, you know what I
Spiritual
mean?
therapy.
Yeah, it's like getting some off your chest, it feels that way. And I don't have a lot of the fears I used to now. Yeah, they don't, because I had this really, really bad hallway. And I don't know why things like to be in hallways. I have no idea. But there used to be a little girl that would stand in my hallway, and I ain't seen her in years because I do cleanses on my home. And I don't feel the presences like I used to. I don't know if I just learned my authority in God and now they're afraid to come in here. I don't know, but they're not here no more. They're not. So, I mean, I still see stuff, but not necessarily in my house.
Right.
So, yeah, it's gotten a lot better. So, you can't be free from it. It just takes a little bit of time.
That was actually going to be one of the last questions I asked was, do you still experience things?
Yeah, a lot of times, I do have the empath type stuff where you can sense people, things about people. I have that. I can still see the things. I'm not afraid anymore though. I just look at them like little punk, I'm not afraid, but a lot of the times lately it's been dreams. I'll see what's going on and I'll pray about it and it works. I mean, I still see stuff. And at first I get startled and then I get angry because at first you're like, oh, and you're like, oh no, because I've seen people, I had some dude's eyes, how people were talking about the black eyes, like on TikTok and stuff where they see people that happened to me. I think it was 3 years ago. And the guy growled at me and I still see weird stuff. But my perception has changed to where I'm no longer afraid of it. I kind of face it now. I don't have to be afraid of it anymore.
Right.
So, yeah, I do still see stuff. I just haven't seen it in my house a whole lot.
Well, that's probably for the best.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think, we went to a hotel a few months ago and we were staying in another state and I saw things in the hallway and stuff. I saw a dark shadow in the hallway. Now I just kind of look at it. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm like, I'm just kind of like, leave, bye, go, I'm not afraid of it no more, I think, so going through all of it, I have strength now. I think I'm much better now. And that's what I want to help other people do. People that were afraid, I want to help them have that strength now.
No, I completely understand.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on nobody. It's sad. It's scary. It's traumatizing. It can be very traumatizing. So.
Well, Valerie, it has been a pleasure talking with you. But before we wrap it up, I'd like for you to let everyone know again what your YouTube channel's called, and I will try and make sure to include a link if you send it to me in the show notes for anyone listening.
Okay, it's a Candle in the Darkness. And I'm on Rumble too, but mainly YouTube. So yeah, Candle in the Darkness.
Awesome. If you'd like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And just remember, truth comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price?
I heard a story late last night about something lurking along the wood line. Huge footprints, strange lights in the sky. They claim it's nothing, but I know they lie. It's easier to laugh in my face, but something about this makes me say, what if it's real? What if they knew? What if the answers are coming from you? Spinning stories, wasting my time, hearing voices, is it all in their minds? They can call me crazy, but I just want some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They see a dog man walking, or maybe a mothman flies above the buried giants hidden beneath the lies. They say it's just stories, it's all make-believe, fairy tales for the things we can't perceive. They want to keep us blinded, they want to break our will, but I'm not buying it, I'm not swallowing another pill. Force-fed poison, the lies were made to believe. What if the truth could set us free? Alien signals traveling through time, secret space programs erasing their minds. They call them crazy, but I just need some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They laugh, they lie, we all could die, but the signs are there if you open your eyes. Aliens, cryptids, demons, ghosts, the Nephilim too. What if it's me? Or what if it's real? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. It's all in our heads, it's all in our minds. These voices can't be silenced, the truth must rise. Tinfoil tales, it's pulling me through. What if it's real? What if it's true?